love it.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Huddle on Tuesday, where we talk about everything relationships and communication. And today we have a special guest. We have Dr. Monica Ogando, who is also a daily host, the Daily Huddle host. And today we are going to talk about how do we tap into our humanity in everyday situations. And I know most of you know Dr. Monica, but I just have to say a couple things for those of you who don't, because she is a badass. She is the CEO of and founder of CEO Mastery, which is an executive and leadership development firm working with exceptional leaders. She is the author of 3 books, twice TEDx speaker, and keynotes in the areas of leadership, marketing, and communication. So I'm going to keep it short today because I know most of you know her, and I'm really excited that she said yes to coming on with us today.
I am excited to be here too. Thank you for having me, Catherine.
Yes. So I wanted to talk about how do we tap into our humanity, because with everything that's been going on in the world with Helene and then Milton, there are stories coming out of all areas, Western North Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, of really extreme kindness, people coming together from all walks of life, from every political background, race, religion, age, socioeconomic status, coming together and helping for a common purpose. Amazing, and it's heartwarming. It brings tears to my eyes to talk about it. And it makes me wonder, how can we do more of that in the absence of tragedy?
Yeah, right. So I love this conversation, Catherine, because I'm a fan of examining assumptions. And the idea that we have to tap into as though it is a conscious, separate, like introductory step implies that we don't always operate from our notion. I think that the time of individualism and of putting profits first and in using people as mechanisms for our own agenda and being transactional was parenthetical in terms of our moving through human history. That hasn't always been the way that we have worked. It has never, it actually has been a glitch in the matrix that we've done that to each other. Typically, and for millions, I'm going to say thousands of years, we've operated in community, we've operated in collaboration. And of course, we've had skirmishes and wars and territorial things, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a function of our ego. That's not a function of our community. Even when we have fought in wars and so forth, we've done that in community. That's why there's such a big culture in the military with each other, the brotherhood of it and the sisterhood of it and so forth, because we do even fight in community. And so the conversation around how can we tap more into our humanity, do what you've always done and unlearn the ways in which you've been trained or raised or realized to think that people are mechanisms and transactions. And one of the things that has happened lately, I'm going to infuse a little bit of the spiritual matters Thursday in here, is that we have started paying attention to ancient sciences such as astrology. When it's interesting because when the Renaissance happened around the 1600s and 1700s, and the advent of science, physical science, right, like biology and chemistry and physics started taking the forefront, other sciences started taking the back seat. And when women have traditionally been the caretakers and the medicine people in families and in communities, and when they started deciding that they wanted to make a profit off of medicine, then they started vilifying women as witches so that men could become doctors. And so when you know these things about history, then you understand that it's like, we're not really doing anything new. We're just going back to what we knew worked. And at some point we've debunked so that we can make money, so that somebody else could stay and remain in power. And now we're like, oh, that's not sustainable. Oh, let's go back to how we used to do it hundreds and thousands of years ago. And so just a return to love, as Marianne Williamson said in her book.
Yeah, that's so true. I love what you're saying, because it's like, I think sometimes for me anyway, if I'm in this world, this is my own world, that I don't remember that, it is this world. And so I'm seeing what I'm seeing now. And so that seems novel that people are coming together and working together, as opposed to what you're describing.
Yeah.
And even as I look out my window and I look at my street and my neighborhood, there are big fences and big hedges. And I see my neighbor who lives next door to me more at the grocery store or at the local restaurant than I do out in the yard. And when they first moved in, there wasn't a fence, and we saw each other all the time because we were outside and moving around. But now there's a big fence. And so we never see each other.
So part of the Western thought around how we interact with the planet is that we live on it but not with it. And that we, instead of being stewards of each other and of the planet, that we are owners of each other and of the planet. That's where the whole idea of slavery even came in. Or even owning a piece of land. Part of the reason why colonizers were able to get away with as much violence and destruction and thievery as they did was because these different cultures had different ideas of what it meant to live in a land. In indigenous cultures, you live in a land because you're taking care of it, not because you own it. So when you're passing that along to somebody else, you're not saying, okay, now you own it. It was, no, now you take care of it. Because I've got a deal. These people are stupid. How could they just give it away for da 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 da? Because it's not mine or yours. And so this is out of respect. This is a gesture of generosity. This is not a gesture of naivete. And so now, fast forward to the 21st century, we have big hedges and big fences and da da da, because like, this is mine. And this is where my ownership stops and yours begins, right? And so when we start communicating from a place of we are all being stewards together, that's our sneak peek into the door of collaboration and community and of being neighborly and creating a larger family with our human family all across the world. And it's starting with our communities.
Yeah, it's hard for me sometimes though, because it seems like such a dramatic difference to how I live, for instance, with big hedges and fences and faraway neighbors. So you say is, in fact, the thought that I had is, I love to make furniture and I've started opening it up to neighbors who want to learn how to make stuff, right? So like, it's been super fun, but it's still segmented. It's like they're coming into my space. And in this moment, when you said that, I thought, oh, actually, maybe it's like ours and they're coming to enjoy ours, so that maybe that's a simple way to make the shift versus like, how do I?
Yeah. And we've, this is a charity organizations. One of my colleagues, my business friends, Amy Walker, who I did my podcast, Your Circle of Influence, just went and participated in some relief efforts in South Carolina because of the hurricane damage that was caused there. And we've done that. When there's been a earthquake, for example, in Haiti, that big earthquake that happened, I think 2010, 2012, something like that. Big circling around the Haitian community. I'm sure Sorrel participated in that as well. And so there have been pockets, to your point. It's like a happening thing, a performance thing, as
right.
a way of culture, right? And so now what is happening is that the negative effects of capitalism has been catching up to us. Like, oh, we can't drop radioactive nuclear stuff and explosive things around the planet and expect the climate not to change. Who knows? Things were connected like that. They're not individual separate things. And the individual separate thing was never sustainable. That's not the way that our bodies work. That's not the way that the planet works. And it's high time that people started maturing to realize that. It's something that the ancients and the indigenous peoples have known since inception. And so you can take just our bodies. Just our bodies. If something happens with your teeth, it affects your cardiovascular health. If you go blind, God forbid, if you ever go blind, your other senses come in to compensate for your lack of sight, right? And so in the same way, when one of the systems in our bodies go down and the others come up to compensate so that you can still remain functional, so that you can still remain healthy. In the same way with our communities, that's what we get to do. That's what we get to remember that we do.
Well, that's it. It's like, how do we remember? Like, how do you remember? Because this seems like second nature to you that you're always, but I mean, like I said, I'm really operating alone in my house, doing my work on my computer with my Zoom screen. And then I have to remind myself. So it's not second nature, the more and more I get sort of.
Well, again, it's not something you learn, it's something you remember, because you do have it in you. And we've done it. We have found a way to communicate and to collaborate with other communities, even as we are isolated in our own homes. And the Rona helped us to remember that, because we got really participatory in online communities, for example. And there are some things, especially now with how ubiquitous the internet is, you can learn what's in your bedroom. Right. It used to be that, you didn't know that there was another half of the world before, let alone what was happening in it, because you were just concerned about your own neighborhood. You didn't have technology to learn about news and can be informed, but you have different channels of distribution of that source. Instead of learning it from a local American media, you can hear European channels, African channels, et cetera, so you can find out what are they saying about themselves and not just the propaganda that's being fed to us in our country. And asking questions. When you do go to the supermarket, talk to people. When you if you go to church, if you go to a sports club, if you participate in, a local volleyball league, or take music classes, or your church community, or your HOA, et cetera, there are always ways that we can start planting seeds of community and collaboration everywhere that we go, and to operate from and we can kind of be reductive about it and think, oh, well, I'm an introvert, so I don't really operate that way. Introvert just means that you get your energy from the inside and not the outside. It doesn't mean that you're antisocial. It doesn't mean that you're shy. It doesn't mean that you don't like people. For some, it might mean that.
But they're not mutually exclusive. Yeah.
That's not the definition.
Yeah,
Don't use it as an excuse.
Well, it's funny. I was going to ask you about that because what you're
Yeah.
describing is somebody who's very social and very outgoing, and I was going to say very extroverted. But to your point, introverts existed in communities, thousands of years ago, as you're describing. They just may have operated in them differently, had different roles, different.
Yeah, and if we're gonna go there with the introvert extrovert distinction, introverts are really just they take in a lot of the world, as opposed to having the world take in a lot of them, right? So very observant, and you can detect patterns, and you can make observations about the way that people move and the way and what are the differences, what's the contrast, what are the similarities. That's wisdom, that's insight, and that's very important to the community. Whereas there are some people that are just out there, they don't notice that stuff. They need an introvert in their ear to balance out the execution of some strategy with the wisdom of the come from for it,
Yeah.
So we all help each other out in that way.
Yeah. It comes to me then, my next question, because we've had a guest on the last couple of weeks who's been talking about trauma. Like, what about those who don't feel like the world is safe based on their experience in the world?
I think, and again, to insert a little bit of the Spiritual Matters Thursday vibe here, I think human beings on an individual journey and as a community, we all get to the point where we understand that there's no out there, that the world itself is a projection of our own consciousness, and not to say that from a place of victim blaming. That's not where I'm going with it. Where I'm going with it is that to solidify and to equip yourself. I had a friend recently, a new person that I met, said to me, "Do you trust me?" And you would think that because we've only known each other for a couple of months, that the answer would be like, I don't know yet if I trust you, because I don't really know you. But my answer was an unequivocal yes. And they were kind of surprised, like, oh, okay, great. Like maybe we're further along in our friendship than I thought, right? Because you just said that you trust. Is that I trust you because I trust myself. And whatever you may show up as, violent or betraying or whatever, that's all feedback for me of something that I get to take on. Now, it's in a spectrum, right? Because that could be a skirmish, that could be a disagreement, that could be an argument, that could be, and then it can grow all the way to trauma, that you mentioned, right? And then that takes on a whole kind of life of its own. But when somebody believes that the world is not safe, you first have to create safety within yourself, just to regulate your nervous system. Forget what's going on out there and trying to convince yourself that there are safe people out there. Let's forget that for a second. Let's focus on solidifying and equipping you. How do you create safety for yourself? How do you regulate your own nervous system? What makes you feel like, okay, for now, I'm good. For now, this is well with my soul. And then from there, we start stacking, building a brick upon brick. Then you focus on intimate relationships. There are people, emotional support, or financial or social or career support, etc. And so you start expanding those concentric circles so that you understand there may be places and people in this world that are not safe for me, but there is safety in the world for me. And you just get to see that evidence of that. We take it bit by bit.
I guess that's tricky sometimes if the person who is seeing the world is a reflection and they aren't seeing that, right? And they don't know how to equip themselves. Maybe that's the feel safe. If I don't know how to go home and like make myself feel totally safe, like who are the people that make me feel okay? Even in this moment, like, so I like what you're saying is like starting small and then using it as building blocks.
And sometimes it also depends on what you are looking at, right? Like I remember one time, she's a runner, she's slender, she's a runner. I'm a lifter. When I did track and field, it was not field. It was field because I was a lean person. And my sister invited me out to go running with her. And so she's just like going and run and watching the birds and the trees. And I'm over here like, this is not what I do.
Right.
Right. So I got frustrated with my own incompetence compared to how easy it was for her. And I started crying, Catherine. I was like, my God,
it's
I'm
really
just
hard
not
to
a runner.
I'll just say that.
And she tracks and she goes, you're saying you're not a runner as you are running. And so for us, we have to look at where are we looking for what I'm not capable of, et cetera. I wasn't looking at, I'm actually doing the thing that I'm uncomfortable about, right? So we have to start looking for evidence of, the thing that we want to create, the sense of safety that we want to create. Okay, where does it already exist? That I don't have to do anything. Just sitting here, just noticing and observing. Where am I safe? Like I'm breathing. There are no bombs dropping around me. Nobody's beating my butt. The roof isn't going to
it's funny. I thought that originally when we first started talking, because you were saying you have to remember. And I thought, I wonder if I'm just looking at the ways in which all these ways that I am connected. When Helene hit, my neighbor came over and helped me dig trenches all night long so that water didn't come in my basement, right? And, likewise, it's all happening all the time. So isn't that what the brain does? So if we start to look at where we're connected, then that can grow.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
That's beautiful. I love that. Well, and I want to have people have a chance to come in and ask questions. What is your hope and dream for the world right now?
I am hoping, and my dream and hope and prayer for the world is that we all remember that we are made in the image and likeness of God, whatever that looks like, whatever that feels like. And for a long time in human history, we organized our societies, our arts, our crafts, our science, our politics around the idea that we are God. And And some people took it and ran with it and became and it started inserting separateness in it. Like, I'm God, but you're not. I'm God and I'm better than you. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking everybody is made in the image and likeness of God. And so when we start remembering that, we start treating each other with more honor, with more respect. If you think of your most favorite person in the world, like the person is like, I just enjoy their company. We like hanging out. I love it when they come over. I'm always looking forward to seeing them. If you think of that person, imagine how you would move in the world if you treated everybody like that person.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a much different feel, like I've got a couple of areas in my life where I'm having trouble, like having to have difficult conversations. And when you just said that, I layered on that person in that conversation, it all got a lot easier.
A lot easier. And then you have more grace and you give them the benefit of the doubt and you're not anticipating, conflict or adversarial behavior, or, you just think, even if they do have adversarial behavior, you're like, you must have not had any sleep or what's going on.
Right.
And you're free to have that kind of conversation and create permission to go there with people, because you know that there's a level of intimacy and trust that you have with your favorite person that you don't assume with other people. But if you were to assume it, you'd go much further.
We talk about this so gracefully. It just like literally oozes out of you. It rolls off your tongue.
Yeah.
What happens for you too?
Yes, Lord. My philosophy is pause before responding, pause before receiving. I'm not trying to kill you today. You know what I mean? But then you pause before receiving, because also sometimes the things that come at you, that's how you grew up. I wasn't raised that way, Lord. And so you got to pause before responding and pause before receiving. That's number one. And then number two is sometimes you ain't got it. And you got to disclose that to people so that they make it, today I got the knives out. Prepare yourself.
You might want to end this conversation now.
I am prepared.
Yeah,
and I ain't got it today.
I think it's so true, and it really is that simple, honestly, when you're right. And whatever is getting triggered in us, which then triggers that whole sequence of events, like you said, that gets you going.
I use my go-to question that I always ask myself to kind of check in. It's kind of like an audit question for myself. When you're operating out of your ego, it doesn't make you feel good either.
Right.
It might feel good to kind of like release it and whatever, but inside
it's true. It's true.
And so my question to myself, when I'm going on a rampage, it wouldn't even occur to the higher self version of me to go there with some people. But my ego loves when they go low, we go as low. That when I'm operating that way, it's like, oh, okay, I'm not operating from my higher self. All right, well, I mean, now that you know, you can make a choice. Do we keep going down the hill, or do we pivot?
Yeah.
And choose that.
No, that's great. It's funny because it does feel good in the moment when ego operates like that, or else we wouldn't do it. It's like it just, you want to get it, but then you get that scab off, and then it's like, it hurts and it's uncomfortable and it rubs on stuff, so it really doesn't feel good. That initial like jab.
Yes. That's a great, albeit gross analogy.
It's gross. That's what came to my mind. Yes. So I see Gio's in the house. Gio. Welcome, Gio. Such a great conversation. I really really appreciate how easily you talk about things like this, because this doesn't feel easy to me. When we're talking about it, the eyes of God, oh my gosh, of course, right? Or you're part of a community.
Yes.
But I go to another place, like my mind goes to a different place. So maybe it is that simple, just to have reminders,
Yes.
Keep coming back.
And then let's access all of our inner 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old little girls, little boys inside of us. When we were little, we just wanted to play. But the next person that we saw was like, you want to go on the stroll. And now we're like, oh, but what if they're busy? And what if they don't live here?
Their ball is a different color. Or what if like it doesn't bounce the way mine bounces?
We had none of those concerns when we were little. So let's go.
Yeah, that's a great point. Michelle.
So going back to ownership, I thought that really ties into the rest of the conversation. If you think of how all the horror stories of people who have renters, who own rental properties, and the place gets trashed because the people only rent. And it makes me think that we have a renter mentality for the rest of it.
Analogy. Yeah, as opposed to being a steward. Like everywhere you go, you're a steward. You're a steward of the places you go, the people that are interested in your care.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that was
I love that
takeaway.
Thank you, Michelle. No, it's so true. I mean, it's I think to your point, Monica, everything that you've been saying, which is in what, in your body, it's like you wouldn't cut out your left eyeball, because I don't know, for any reason, right?
Right.
Or hurtful.
Yes, exactly. Can you imagine if you were like, well, I'm a righty, so let's do that.
Right. But I think to see it like that, as opposed to, because there are like that, again, the mind is fascinating, right? It comes up with these constructs, or you're here, my skin, and that's the difference between me and the world and other people. That means that you're separate and you're different. And so, as opposed to like a larger connection. So I'm loving the reminder that it's
what you just described, this whole idea of I'm separate and you're than you, and so therefore I have to protect myself, or I have to do or I have to take over so that I can show dominance. And I think that's called cancer. When cells take over that way, it's like, I don't care what you're up to, I don't care that we're not part of the same team, I'm going to eat you up. That's called cancer in the body.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing with each other until we stop to interrupt that.
It's beautiful. I love it. Thank you for being willing to come on today, because you give us
Absolutely. I'm
to
glad
think
that we were able
about.
to play with each other, volleyball with each
That's
other.
right. That's right. Yeah. Give us one last takeaway, something we can do. I'm always like an action person. Like, what can I do today? Or yeah, that'll help shift this mentality.
Some of us have daily habits. We know how to brush our teeth on the daily. We know how to take a shower on the daily. We know how to make our bed on the daily, or maybe you do cardio on the daily, whatever the case may be. Do a random act of kindness on the daily. Have that be part of your spiritual practices.
Mm.
Pay somebody's toll or talk to a stranger, rested in the person and not just trying to make yourself interesting. And, spreading good cheer in that way. So you never know what eventually we create critical mass of connection.
I love that. Thank you. Random acts of kindness. So everybody take that away and see what you can do with that. I'm going to do the first of which is love, which is all right here in this conversation about loving ourselves, loving each other, and how connected we all are. And laugh. We've done a lot of that today. So be sure to laugh, throw your head back, enjoy life. You want to eat more plants, rest, so the knives don't come out. Yeah. Move that body. Be sure to give of your time and of your resources, and stir out, walking each other home. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you all next time on the Daily.